They said he was dangerous, a broken Marine who couldn't let go of the war. But the truth? He was just a father who watched a judge hand his children to the man who broke their bones when no one was looking. And the night those kids whispered, "Daddy, don't leave us here," that's the night he snapped. By sunrise, the whole town was hunting him. The law called it kidnapping, but to him, it was the only way to keep his children alive. What no one knew, not the police, not even the kids in the back seat, was how deep the corruption went, and how far a father will fall when the system leaves him no other choice. The courtroom smelled of old wood polish and disinfectant. Empty benches creaked under the weight of silence broken only by the clerk's pen, scratching, relentless. At the front, beneath the state seal, the judge's voice dropped like a hammer. "Custody of both minors is hereby granted to the mother Angela Morris and her husband Charles Morris." The words didn't echo. They detonated in Daniel Hayes' chest. Ex-Marine, 2 tours in Fallujah, a man who'd faced snipers in foreign deserts, yet nothing had ever cut this deep, this helpless. Behind him, his 8-year-old son Caleb sobbed, shoulders shaking, uncontrollable. 12-year-old Emma tried to be braver, her small hands clawing at the wooden rail, gripping the last shred of safety. "Please," Emma's voice cracked, soft, too faint for the judge, but piercing Daniel's heart. "Daddy, don't make us go back." The bailiff looked away. Angela, in her pressed navy blazer, stared at the floor, and Charles, the new husband, leaned back, smiling. His thick fingers drummed the table, like a man already tasting his next drink. Daniel rose, voice ready to break the silence, but his lawyer's hand pressed his arm down. "Don't. It's over." But Daniel's war-trained instincts screamed otherwise. It wasn't over. Not when the system handed his children to a man who left bruises they were too scared to name. Not when he'd spent weeks photographing marks, begging social services, only to be told his Marine past meant anger issues. The gavel struck. The custody battle ended. The war had just begun. That night, the house was a coffin. Daniel sat on his bed's edge, still in his wrinkled courtroom suit, damp with sweat. Medals hung on the wall. Service, sacrifice, loyalty. Worthless now. His children were given to a monster, and the country he'd fought for had turned its back. A soft knock. He opened the door to Emma, eyes red, still in school clothes. Wordless, she pressed a folded piece of notebook paper into his hand. He unfolded it, and his throat closed. Not words. A drawing. A stick figure man, tall, 2 children beside him, holding hands, smiling. Above, in shaky crayon, "Daddy, don't leave us here." Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms. She trembled, but didn't cry. Not this time. She whispered, voice breaking, "He makes Caleb sleep in the basement when Mom isn't home." His pulse hammered. He pulled back, gripping her shoulders. "Why didn't you tell the judge?" She looked down. "Because Mommy told us not to." The next day was his final visitation. 2 hours to say goodbye, supervised. Then Charles and Angela would take full custody. The state called it stability. Daniel called it CAGE. He took them to the park instead. Emma sat on the swings, rocking silently. Caleb clung to his leg, refusing to play. "You're not safe there," Daniel said, voice low, scanning the empty playground. "And no one will protect you." "Then you have to, Daddy," Emma whispered, "even if it's wrong." That night, as shadows swallowed the town, Daniel chose. The court ordered the children returned by 8 p.m. At 8:01, he was still driving. Headlights off, engine humming low, his pickup ate the back roads out of town. Emma held Caleb in the back seat, whispering stories to keep him calm. In the rear view, Daniel saw her eyes. Not afraid, not confused. Resolute. She knew. She'd known since that drawing. They passed the Morris house turnoff. Caleb noticed. "Daddy, that's not the way." "No, son," Daniel said, voice like steel. "It's the only way." But the real shock wasn't on the road. It was back at the Morris house. Angela stood at the window, curtain pulled aside, watching taillights vanish into the night. Charles stormed in, red-faced, half-drunk. "You let him take them?" he shouted. Angela didn't answer. Her face pale, hand gripping the curtain. When Charles grabbed her wrist, she pulled away. Sharp, the first time in months. In her silence, a truth flickered. She hadn't stopped Daniel. She hadn't called the police. She hadn't spoken. Because deep down, she wanted him to take them. The pickup roared down back roads, tires crunching gravel. Every mile, the knot in Daniel's stomach tightened. He'd broken the law. To the state, he was a kidnapper. To himself, he was the only shield between his children and a monster. Emma sat upright, hands tight around Caleb. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't need to. Daniel's eyes flicked to the mirrors. Any headlight, any shadow could be police. He knew the system would move fast. Amber Alert, roadblocks, his face everywhere. He'd trained for war, but not this. Fighting his country on home soil. At a red light on the town's outskirts, Caleb stirred. "Daddy, are we bad now?" Daniel's throat closed. He glanced at Emma, her face like stone. She already knew. Innocence was gone in this fight. The light turned green. Daniel gunned the engine, blowing past. By midnight, they reached the state line. Daniel pulled into a shuttered gas station, headlights off. He killed the engine, listening. Insects hissed. The night smelled of oil and dust. He pulled a map from the glove box, old, wrinkled, marked for Marine days. Safe routes, back roads, places patrols didn't check. He traced a path to a cabin in the hills, once a training retreat, now abandoned. It would do. "Are we hiding?" Emma asked, voice quiet. Daniel looked back. Her tone, not frightened, not panicked, but accepting, broke him. "For a while," he said, "until I can fix this." "Can you?" she pressed. He didn't answer. Back at the Morris house, Angela sat in the kitchen, unmoving. The clock ticked past midnight. Charles paced, half a bottle gone, rage in every step. "You called the cops, right?" he barked. Angela's eyes stayed on the linoleum. "Angela!" His hand slammed the wall, rattling cabinets. She looked at him, voice flat, cold. "They'll find him." Not an answer. A delay. And Charles saw it. Something new in her. Rebellion. Quiet. Deliberate. She hadn't dialed the phone. She hadn't moved. In her silence, she'd chosen sides. On the road, Daniel kept the radio off. No Amber Alert for the kids to hear. But dread grew heavier in his chest. He thought of the judge's gavel, Charles' smirk, Emma's drawing. He'd sworn an oath once, to protect his country. Now his mission was smaller, sharper. Protect his children, at all costs. Red and blue flashed ahead. A checkpoint. Daniel slowed, pulling behind two cars. Emma clutched Caleb, nails digging into his sleeve. An officer leaned to his window. "Evening, sir." "Where you headed?" Daniel forced a smile. "Family trip. Kids want to see cousins in Richmond." The officer's flashlight swept the back. Caleb squeezed his eyes shut. Emma held her breath. The beam lingered. Too long. Daniel's pulse thundered. One wrong move and it was over. A radio crackled down the line. The officer straightened. "All right. Drive safe." Daniel pulled away, exhaling only when the lights faded in the rear view. Emma leaned forward. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby." "You lied to him." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Sometimes lying keeps people safe." Hours later, they reached the cabin. The door groaned as Daniel pushed it open. Dust danced in the flashlight's beam. It smelled of old wood, mildew, memories. He spread blankets on the floor. Caleb collapsed, exhaustion overtaking fear. Emma stayed awake, watching Daniel pace. "Daddy?" she said, soft. He stopped. "You won't let him hurt us again, right?" Daniel knelt, meeting her eyes. His voice was gravel. "Not while I'm breathing." She nodded. But her eyes held something else. Not relief, not fear. A heavy understanding. Back in town, police swarmed. Amber alerts blared. Patrol cars circled highways. Charles roared at every officer who entered. Angela sat on the sofa, cigarette smoke curling from her fingers. "You're not even worried," Charles spat. She turned slowly, face unreadable. "They're safer with him than here." She'd said it, admitted what she'd known for years. In that moment, though the law branded Daniel a criminal, Angela's silence made him something else. The only one who might save them. The system called it kidnapping. The police called him armed and dangerous. But the truth was stranger. His ex-wife, who stood beside her husband in court, had let him drive away. Not because she trusted him, but because she knew he was the only one who'd dare to do what she never could. And the children, wrapped in blankets on a cabin floor, sensed it too. They weren't just running from danger. They were running from the truth about their own mother. The cabin walls creaked in the night wind, each groan a whisper of footsteps. Daniel barely slept. He sat rigid in a chair by the door, rifle across his knees, eyes locked on the dark tree line, searching for shadows that moved too close. His children breathed softly on the floor, innocent, unaware that the world was already closing in. Tight, relentless. When dawn broke, pale and cold, Daniel slipped outside. The air was sharp, mountain cold, biting his skin. He pulled his phone from his pocket, dead battery, good. No GPS tracking, no trace. But in the glove compartment he had another device, an old burner from his Marine days. Outdated, untraceable, still alive. He powered it up, fingers steady, and dialed a number he hadn't touched in years. "Reese," a gravelly voice answered, heavy with time. "Yeah," Daniel said low, unyielding. "It's me." Silence held the line for a beat, then, "Jesus, Hayes, they've got your name everywhere. What the hell did you do?" Daniel's voice was steel, cold, and sharp. "What I had to." Reese met him 2 hours later at an abandoned truck stop off Highway 17. His beard was thicker, belly heavier, but his eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, hadn't dulled. He didn't ask questions, not at first. He just looked at Emma and Caleb in the back seat, small and quiet, then back at Daniel, his face grim. "You're in deep," he muttered, voice low, weighted. "They're calling it kidnapping. Every badge in 3 states is hunting you." Daniel leaned close, his words a controlled burn. "Then, tell me why the system handed my kids to a man with a sealed assault record." Reese's brow furrowed, eyes narrowing. "You're sure?" Daniel pulled a folder from under his seat. Dog-eared, stained, but heavy with truth. Photographs of bruises on Caleb's arms, Emma's split lip, emergency room notes that had vanished from the official record. He thrust it toward Reese. "Every time I brought this forward," Daniel hissed, voice tight with fury, "the paperwork disappeared. Judges called it unsubstantiated. Social workers never followed up. Why?" Reese flipped through the photos, his face darkening, jaw tight. "Because someone's paying them not to." They drove to a library in the next county where Daniel hunched over an ancient public computer, fingers flying, eyes burning. Reese stood watch at the door, a silent sentinel. Daniel dug into state records, cross-checking Charles Moore's name with every file he could reach. The first crack came in a budget report. Consulting fees paid to a shell company. The address didn't lead to a business, but to Charles' brother. Then the real break. A list of closed Child Protective Service investigations. Dozens. All unsubstantiated. All tied to families where Charles had been present. Daniel's blood turned to ice, his pulse a slow, heavy drum. This wasn't just about his kids. It was bigger. A network. A cover-up. Cases buried for cash. Children left in the hands of monsters because men like Charles had bought their way into protection. By late afternoon, the children grew restless. Caleb tugged at Daniel's sleeve, his small voice trembling. "Daddy, when can we go home?" Daniel knelt, his voice breaking, soft, raw. "Home isn't safe anymore, son. Not until I fix this." Emma stood behind her brother, pale, her eyes fixed on the files scattered across the motel bed. "What if you can't fix it?" she asked, her voice quiet, fragile, cutting deeper than any blade. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Then I'll die trying." That night, Reese slipped out to make a call. Daniel didn't ask who. Time was slipping away. He pieced together a chain of corruption. Courtrooms, hospitals, child services, all linked, all rotten. Every lead carved a new wound of realization. His fight wasn't just against one man. It was against a system. Then came the twist, sharp and shattering. Not from a document, but from his own son. Caleb crawled into his lap, small fingers clinging to Daniel's shirt. His voice was a whisper, fragile, trembling. "Daddy, Mommy knew." Daniel froze, heart stopping. "What do you mean?" "She told us never to tell," Caleb said, eyes wide with fear, glistening. "She said if we said anything, bad men would hurt us. She said staying with Charles kept us safe." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the heater faded, swallowed by the void. Daniel's hands shook as he held his boy, his mind reeling, fracturing. Angela hadn't just looked away. She hadn't been blind. She had known. She had chosen. Daniel stepped into the icy night, breath turning to vapor, fists clenched so tight his nails drew blood. Memories stormed through him. Angela's silence in court, her refusal to meet his eyes, the way she stood still as he drove away. It wasn't fear. It was complicity. He stared at the dark sky, fury rising like fire in his chest. He had fought insurgents overseas, faced betrayal on battlefields. But nothing cut deeper than this. Betrayal in his own home, by the woman who swore to protect their children as fiercely as he did. Now she was part of it. And if she was part of it, there were no allies left. Only enemies. The cabin's silence had become unbearable. Every creak of wood felt like a warning, sharp, deliberate. Every gust of wind carried the weight of a manhunt closing in, relentless. Daniel hadn't slept in 2 days. The files he'd pulled together sat stacked on the table, damning evidence, poised to break the custody ring wide open. But evidence meant nothing without exposure, and exposure meant trust. That was the problem. He trusted no one. Until the knock came. 3 hard raps, followed by 2 soft, a code he hadn't heard since Fallujah. Daniel snapped to his feet, rifle raised. "Who's there?" The voice was low, steady, hauntingly familiar. "Easy, Hayes." It's Reese. Reese stepped into the cabin, carrying a duffel bag, clinking with metal. He looked older, under the lantern light, heavier, slower, but still carried that hard edge forged in the fires overseas. "Kids asleep?" Reese asked, nodding toward the blankets in the corner. Daniel gave a stiff nod. "Barely." Reese dropped the duffel on the table. Zippers peeled back, revealing 2 pistols, extra magazines, rations, a prepaid phone. "You're burning daylight, brother. Every badge in 3 states is watching for you. But I've got..." A way out, Daniel stared at the weapons, then at Reese. I don't need to disappear. I need to expose this. Charles, the court, CBS, they're all in on it. Reese smirked. You think I don't know how deep this rabbit hole goes? Hell, half the guys we served with came home to find their families destroyed by systems like this. You want to fight back? Fine. But you can't. Do it alone. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then how? Reese slid the prepaid phone across the table. A journalist. Name's Keller. She's been chasing corruption cases, for years. Judges, cops, child services, she'll take your files. She'll make noise. Real noise. Daniel hesitated. Why would she trust me? The whole country thinks I'm a kidnapper. Reese leaned in. Because the truth sells better than lies. You give her proof, she'll blast it everywhere. Then it won't just be your fight. It'll be national. The call was made the next morning. Keller's voice was clipped, skeptical. She wanted to meet in person. No phone drops, no digital trails. Daniel agreed. They set the meet for midnight in an abandoned factory outside the county line. The hours leading up to it were heavy. Daniel paced the cabin, rehearsing what to say. Emma watched him, eyes sharp beyond her years. Daddy, can you really trust him? She whispered. Once Reese stepped outside for a smoke. Daniel looked at her. Reese saved my life, more than once. If I can't trust him, I can't trust anyone. Emma didn't answer. She just pulled Caleb closer and stared into the flames of the lantern, as if she already sensed the danger her father couldn't see. Midnight came. The factory loomed like a skeleton against the night sky, broken windows staring like hollow eyes. Reese drove. Daniel sat with the duffel of files on his lap, pulse steady but heavy. The children stayed at the cabin, asleep under layered blankets, unaware their father was gambling their futures on this meeting. Keller was already there, a slim woman in her 40s, trench coat collar pulled up against the cold. She stood by a rusted steel beam, notebook in hand. You must be Hayes, she said, eyes scanning him up and down. You realize the FBI has you on their most wanted list tonight. Daniel held her gaze. Then maybe they should be looking at the people who let men like Charles Morris walk free. He dropped the duffel on the floor. Papers spilled across the concrete. Photographs, receipts, sealed files. He had torn from courthouse bins. Keller crouched, rifling through them, her face growing, darker with each page. This, she muttered, this is systemic. If this gets out, careers are over. People go to prison, then take it, Daniel said. Blow it, open. Keller looked up at him. For the first time her voice softened. You're not crazy, Hayes. You're right. But once I publish this, you'll never walk free again. They'll brand you, a terrorist, a traitor, whatever it takes. Daniel's jaw clenched. I didn't fight in a desert to watch my kids rot in a basement. Do it. The meeting ended in the small hours. Keller drove away with the files promising contact within 48 hours. Daniel and Reese stood in the echoing dark, the sound of Keller's taillights fading into nothing. For the first time in days, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. He turned to Reese. You saved me again, brother. Reese gave a tight smile. Always will. But as they walked back to the truck, Daniel didn't see the burner phone in Reese's pocket buzz once, then twice. He didn't see the text light up the screen. Drop confirmed. Location pinged. Wipe my record. Gen deal done. Back at the cabin, Emma stirred awake as Daniel tucked her in. Did it work? She asked, sleep thick. Yeah, Daniel whispered. It's finally turning. But even as he spoke, The sound of distant sirens carried faintly on the night air. Not close, not yet, but moving. And if Daniel had looked just a little closer at Reese as he poured himself a drink, he would have seen it. The twitch in his jaw, the shadow in his eyes. Because Reese wasn't here to save him anymore. He was here to deliver him. The first call came 3 days later. Daniel sat hunched in the cabin, lantern glow flickering across his face. His burner phone buzzed once, then twice. He answered with a growl. "Keller?" Her voice came sharp, alive, almost trembling. "You weren't wrong, Hayes. Everything you gave me checks out. Shell companies, sealed cases, payments funneled through child services. Morris isn't just abusive, he's protected. And the protection goes high. Judges, police chiefs. Even the district attorney Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Then run it. Publish. Blow it all. Open. I'm ready, Keller said. But once I do, they'll come harder. They won't just call you a kidnapper. They'll call you a domestic terrorist. You won't survive unless you've got a safe place to stand. Daniel looked at his children, curled on the floor. His voice cracked, raw. I don't care what happens to me. Just burn them. Down. The hours after that call felt different. For the first time since the gavel fell in that courtroom, Daniel felt a pulse of hope. The truth was out there, carried in Keller's hands, waiting to explode. Reese seemed calmer too. He cleaned his pistol at the table, poured whiskey into tin cups, even told Caleb a half-hearted Marine story about sandstorms and scorpions. To Daniel, it looked like brotherhood again, the kind they had lost after the war. But Emma kept staring, not at her father, at Reese. Every time he smiled, her eyes narrowed. She felt it, the falseness in his warmth, the weight of a lie in his tone. The night Keller promised to publish, Reese insisted they move. To a safe house, he knew, deeper in the hills. If Keller lights the match, he said, this place won't be safe anymore. Too easy to surround. Too easy to burn. The word burn slid past Daniel's ears without registering. They drove through winding roads, headlights cutting through fog. At the crest of a ridge, Reese led them to an abandoned hunting lodge, sagging roof, broken shutters, but a sturdy stone fireplace inside. Better cover, Reese said. Better angles. Daniel set the kids up in a corner, laid out the few files Keller hadn't taken. His chest felt lighter. He almost believed this was the turning point. But Keller never called back. The night dragged into morning, and silence pressed harder than ever. Daniel paced, checked the burner, checked again. Nothing. By afternoon, paranoia gnawed at him. She should have gone live by now, he muttered. Why hasn't she? A sound cut him off. Tires on gravel outside. Daniel grabbed his rifle, motioned the kids back. Reese peered through the broken shutters, then relaxed. Just her? Keller stepped inside, pale, hair pulled loose from her bun. She dropped her satchel on the floor. Papers spilled out. Charred edges, half-burned notes. Daniel's stomach flipped. What the hell happened? Her voice broke. They got to my office. Firebombed it. Files are gone. Servers fried. Half my notes turned to ash. They knew exactly where to hit Daniel's veins, went cold. You backed it up, right? Please tell me. Keller shook her head. Everything's gone. For a long time no one spoke. Only the crack of the fireplace filled the silence. Then Caleb whispered almost to himself, So, it's all for nothing? Daniel dropped to his knees with deep gaze, holding his son's face. No. We still have us. We still fight. But even as he said it, Doubt ate at him. Emma's eyes darted toward Reese. He wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the door. Listening. Waiting. The attack came at dusk. A shadow moved outside, then another. Then the unmistakable hiss of gasoline splashing against the walls. Daniel's instincts roared to life. "Get down!" he shouted, shoving Emma and Caleb behind the table. The first firebomb shattered against the window. Flames licked across the floorboards. Smoke poured in, thick, acrid. The lodge groaned like a dying animal. "Out the back!" Daniel roared. He grabbed the duffel, yanking Keller and the kids toward the rear exit. Reese moved too, but too slowly. His hesitation burned like a signal. And then Daniel saw it. The flicker of a phone in Reese's hand, screen glowing, with a single line of text. Delivery confirmed. Rage shot through Daniel like shrapnel. "You sold us out!" he snarled. Reese's jaw clenched. He didn't deny it. Another firebomb smashed. The flames surged. Keller screamed as smoke filled her lungs. Caleb coughed violently, tears streaking through the soot on his face. Daniel made his choice in an instant. He slammed Reese into the wall, ripped the burner from his hand, then dragged the children into the night through a back window. Behind them, the lodge became an inferno. Flames roared, swallowing the roof in a storm of sparks. Reese staggered outside, coughing, skin scorched red. He tried to follow, but the second explosion tore through the structure. A collapsing beam crushed him against the stone wall. Daniel turned, watching through the smoke as his old brother-in-arms screamed once, then went silent. For a heartbeat, he saw the man who had once dragged him bleeding out of an ambush in Iraq, and then, in the next breath, he saw only betrayal. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, we have to go." He turned away. The fire devoured Reese's body, the last of the files, the last thread of proof. Everything was gone. They stumbled into the night, lungs burning, clothes scorched. Keller collapsed on the dirt, coughing blood. Daniel pulled her up, half-dragged her toward the truck. "What now?" she rasped. Daniel's voice was hollow. "Now we survive. And then we make them pay." But as he shoved his children into the truck, the horror carved itself deeper. The documents were ash. The files were gone. The journalist's work was obliterated, and the one man he thought he could trust had led them straight into hell. The fire hadn't even cooled before the search closed in. For 2 nights, Daniel drove aimlessly, through the back roads, headlights off, children curled in the back seat. Keller lay pale, coughing beside him, lungs scarred by smoke. They had no files, no evidence, nothing left but the truth in their memories. Truth that meant nothing without proof. And yet, in every reflection of his rear view, Daniel saw the same image. Angela standing silent in the window that night, watching him drive away. It haunted him, not because of what she had failed to do, but because of what she might still know. Angela Morris hadn't slept in weeks. Charles' hands were heavier now, his drinking worse, his threats sharper. He raged at the walls, at the children's absence, at the police who failed to find Daniel. But Angela's silence was different now. It wasn't submission. It was erosion. Every scream from Charles chipped away at the excuse she had whispered to herself for years. "I stay to protect them. I stay to keep the danger smaller." The truth gnawed like rats in her chest. She hadn't stayed to protect anyone. She had stayed because she was afraid. Afraid of losing money. Afraid of losing face. Afraid of being alone. And now her children were running through the dark with a man branded a fugitive, while she lay beside a monster. The lie could not hold any more. The meeting happened by accident, or FATE. Daniel had stopped at a roadside diner just before dawn, hoping to scavenge food and medicine. The parking lot was empty except for one old sedan. He told Keller to stay hidden with the kids while he stepped inside. The bell above the door rang. He froze. Angela sat at the counter, hands around a cold cup of coffee, her eyes shadowed like bruises. She looked smaller, thinner, as if months had drained years from her. When she turned and saw him, her mouth opened slightly. No scream, no call for help. Just silence. Daniel's voice was a knife. "Why?" Angela stared at him, eyes glassy. "Because if I left him, they promised worse." "Worse?" His laugh was bitter. "He broke Caleb's ribs. He made Emma sleep in closets. What's worse than that?" Her voice cracked. "Do you think it was just him, Daniel? Do you think it ends with Charles? He's part of something. Judges, police. If I ran, they said the kids would disappear, that I'd disappear. So I stayed. I thought I could keep the violence small." Daniel slammed his hand on the counter. The few other diners glanced nervously, but he didn't care. "Small? You call this small?" Tears welled in Angela's eyes. "I was wrong." For the first time in years, Daniel saw her without the mask. No defiance, no rehearsed excuses, no courtroom armor. Just a woman, consumed by guilt. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the counter. It was a note. Names, addresses, bank accounts. The skeleton of the network Charles fed. The same network that had erased Daniel's evidence and burned Keller's office. "I found this in his desk," Angela whispered. "I couldn't keep it anymore." Daniel's chest tightened. Proof. Fragile, incomplete, but real. He stared at her. "Why give this to me now?" Her voice was flat, almost dead. "Because I can't keep pretending I'm a mother if I don't." "They're your children, Daniel. I don't deserve them. But maybe I can help. Save them." They left the diner together, silent, tense. When Emma saw her mother step out of the car behind her father, she flinched. Her first instinct wasn't relief, it was suspicion. "You knew," Emma said, voice sharp, eyes burning. Angela froze. "Emma, you knew what he did to us. And you let him." Caleb clung to his sister's hand, confused. Frighteneed. "Mommy!" Angela's tears fell, openly now. "I thought I was protecting you." "I was wrong." Emma turned away. For her, forgiveness wasn't possible. Not yet. Maybe. Not ever. But Daniel said nothing. He didn't defend her, didn't condemn her, because he knew this wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about survival. The days that followed blurred into planning. Daniel spread Angela's stolen list across the motel desk, tracing the connections. Charles' name, buried in a web of payments and bribes. Keller, still weak from the smoke, cross-checked what she remembered from her lost files. Every line ended in the same conclusion. Charles was more than a drunk with fists. He was a linchpin. A middleman between families and the corrupt officials who kept cases buried. Take him out, and the system staggered. Angela saw it too, and for the first time her voice held steel. "He won't stop, Daniel. Even if Keller prints the story, even if they believe it, Charles will still be standing. He'll hunt you. He'll hunt the kids. He won't stop until he's dead." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So, we kill him," Angela shook her head. Not me. Daniel stared at her. You think that redeems you? You think one bullet fixes years of silence? Angela's eyes didn't waver. I don't care about redemption. I care about ending this. If you do it, they'll say you're a monster, a Marine with PTSD who snapped. If I do it, it's different. I'm his wife. I'm the victim who finally broke Daniel's fists, clenched, veins bulging. You're not the only one who broke, Angela. We all did. But he saw the resolve in her face, and in a strange, twisted way, he knew she was right. If she acted, the system couldn't bury it as easily. If she acted, it would stain the network in a way no file could. And if she acted, she would finally carry the burden she had forced. Onto everyone else, Emma overheard. She stood in the doorway, trembling with rage. You're going to kill him? She hissed. Angela turned, startled. Emma, please. No! Emma's voice cracked. You don't get to decide that now. You let him hurt us. You let him... Her throat closed. Tears streaked her cheeks. You don't get to be the hero now. Angela's shoulders sagged. Her voice broke out into a whisper. I'm not trying to be the hero. I'm trying to be worse, because maybe that's the only way to end it. Emma's sobs shook her body. Daniel pulled her close, but she shoved him away. For her, everything had shattered. Father the fugitive, mother the betrayer, childhood burned to ash. And yet when Angela met her daughter's eyes one last time, she didn't see forgiveness. She didn't expect it. She saw only fire. Because Emma, even at 12, understood what her mother meant. Sometimes the only way to kill a monster is to become one. That night, Angela loaded the gun herself. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with rage. Rage at Charles, rage at herself, rage at the years of silence that had led to this moment. Daniel watched her in silence. His instincts screamed to stop her, to take the gun himself, to end this on his own terms. But a deeper instinct held him back, the grim knowledge that this was no longer his war to fight alone. It was hers. Angela chose Sunday morning. It wasn't just timing. It was theater. Charles would be at St. Luke's, parading his family, in front of neighbors, shaking hands, with deacons pretending at piety. The hypocrisy had always been his shield. What better place, to shatter it than beneath the church's stained glass windows? Daniel wanted to object. He paced the motel floor, fists clenching, eyes burning. In front of the kids? In front of half the damn town? Angela didn't flinch. That's exactly why. If I do this in secret, it disappears like everything else. If I do it there, with everyone watching, they can't bury it. They'll have to look. They'll have to see what he really was. Daniel's voice cracked. Emma already hates you. Caleb's terrified. You do this, you don't just kill him, you kill what's left of them. Angela slid the pistol into her purse. Her eyes were hollow. They were already killed the moment the court gave them to him. I'm just finishing it. The morning came, heavy with storm clouds. Rain slicked the streets as church bells tolled, each note sounding like a countdown. Daniel sat parked 2 blocks away, engine idling, watching Angela walk toward the chapel steps. She wore the same navy coat she had worn in court, but there was no pretense now. No mask, just a woman, carrying a weapon heavier than her conscience. The children watched from the back seat. Caleb clutched Emma's hand, wide-eyed. Emma stared, jaw clenched, tears brimming, but unshed. Why are you letting her do this? She whispered to her father, Daniel's throat tightened. He had no answer. Charles was already on the steps, laughing with parishioners, a Bible tucked under one arm. He looked untouchable. The charming husband, the respectable father, the man neighbors waved at, without knowing the bruises he left behind closed doors. Angela climbed the steps. Her steps were steady, her shoulders straight. For a moment she looked like the woman Daniel had married years ago, fearless, radiant, unbreakable. And then she stopped, 3 feet from Charles. Their eyes locked. His smile faltered. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath. Angela's voice was clear, sharp, cutting through the Sunday murmurs like a blade. "I'm ending it." She pulled the gun. The world slowed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone screamed. Charles reached for her wrist, but she was faster. The first shot shattered the stained glass window above the door. The second tore through his chest. He staggered, eyes wide, blood blooming across his shirt like a grotesque flower. Angela fired again, and again. Each shot echoing against the chapel walls, each one erasing another year of silence. Charles collapsed on the steps, Bible falling from his hand, blood soaking the stone beneath him. For a long moment no one moved. Rain hissed on the pavement. Parishioners stood frozen, clutching children, mouths open in horror. And then the screaming began. Daniel shoved the truck door open, heart hammering. Emma and Caleb scrambled after him, their faces pale with shock. Angela stood above Charles' body, gun still raised, chest heaving. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. She looked at the crowd, at the police already shouting from the street at the children she had betrayed and tried to save in the same breath. And then she lowered the weapon, dropped it on the stone, and raised her hands. For a fleeting second, Daniel thought maybe, just maybe, she would walk away, in cuffs, alive, her act recorded, as justice. But then one of the officers shouted, "Armed suspect! Take her down!" The crack of gunfire rang out. Angela jerked once, twice, then crumpled, beside Charles, her blood mingling with his. Emma's scream ripped the air apart. She broke free from Daniel's grasp, rushing toward the steps, slipping in rain and blood. She dropped to her knees beside her mother, sobbing, shaking her shoulders. "Why did you do it? Why did you do it now?" Angela's eyes fluttered, lips parting with the last of her breath. "Because someone had to." And then her body went still. Emma's sobs turned into ragged wails, her small fists pounding the stone. Caleb clung to his sister, tears streaking his face, unable to understand, unable to breathe. Daniel stood frozen, the rain washing over him. His mind screamed to move, to protect, to fight, but his body felt carved from stone. He had lost battles overseas. He had lost brothers. But nothing compared to this, losing everything, at home, in the war that never made headlines. The aftermath was chaos. Sirens wailed. Police dragged Daniel back, shouting orders, pinning him to the ground. Neighbors screamed about murder, about madness, about blood on the chapel steps. Keller's voice cut through the noise. She had arrived just as the shooting began, her recorder still running. She shouted at officers, shoving her press badge in their faces. This was the wife. This was self-defense. Look at the files she found. Look at the network she exposed. But the officers didn't listen. They only saw blood. That night, Emma sat silent in the station, her hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't speak. When social workers tried to comfort her, she pulled away. Caleb curled beside her, still sobbing, still whispering, for his mother. And Daniel, chained in a holding cell, stared at the cracked ceiling, his mind replaying the moment Angela's body fell. She had acted. She had been worse than him, and for it she had been erased. But the truth was out now. The file she stole, the witnesses at the church, Keller's recording. The network could no longer hide. The cost was unbearable, but the war wasn't over.